Alright, should be videoing a premiere of douchebag Mickey, I guess, Farley, claims that he's debunking something.
2.0 crazy, batshit, insane science theory, totally unfalsifiable, untestable, does not...
Okay, again, more nonsense. It is testable. I've outlined the test, so this is just a lie. A overt, disgusting lie. I mean, I got an hour-long video outlining certain tests you can do to prove your theory is crap, and it's crap. I've just did a video on the two-slit explaining how it's being explained overtly wrong. One of your douchebags concedes it's not the right, it's not right to say the two little waves pop out and make the pattern because two little waves can't do that.
Not make any predictions about the...
More bullshit. I've made tons of predictions. It's just as predictive as their theory. Roll the dice in front of me a few hundred times, and I'll tell you exactly what's going to happen the 217th time. I'll give you the results once I know what the inputs are. Yeah. Their science doesn't predict anything. They didn't predict anything until they already observed it and watched it do it. They don't predict that ducks fly. They watch them fly and then say, look, I'll predict a duck can fly. Not miraculous.
Reality that can be tested.
So just more horseshit. It's just horseshit. Like dark energy can be tested. Like multiverses can be tested. I mean, just horseshit.
Is completely a pseudo-scientific pile of shit.
Well, you should prove that with the draw me a picture of how your waves make the pattern. Go ahead. Show the break in the pattern being created by two symmetrical waves. Can't happen. You won't succeed.
Is a religious cult-like...
No, yours is the religion, and I'm pointing it out. People, when you find a liar, he's going to be a religious kook, right? So, yes, you compulsively and consistently lie about what the evidence is, what the experiments indicate. So you can't do it right, you can't do it honestly. You're clearly the religious kook.
Has a religious cult-like following. And so let's just go through the points. So yes, Gary lies about the true shape of waves. Okay, so I want to make this point.
Okay, the true shape of waves. Yeah, they're consistently symmetrical and spherical. Every time somebody draws them, that's how they draw them, asshole.
Point very, very clear. Okay, Gary, the physics Jesus, lied.
So more nonsense. It's totally irrelevant, right? This is what he has to look. This is how what they have to resort to. They have to resort to this kind of bullshit argument to make an argument, right? Just this provocative name calling and all this shit. They can't just make their fucking argument. They can't prove me wrong. They can't demonstrate me wrong. They have to slander me wrong.
To you about the true shape of waves. Now, how can that be? Because of course we know he's telling the truth. He's the only person who has the truth, and everybody else is just deluded. But he...
Yeah, and I'm proving that. I'm proving you're compulsive liars and you're stupid.
He has sat at home and thought about the nature of reality in his head. Hasn't done any experience.
So these aren't arguments at all. So he says I haven't done any experiments, but of course I did. That's how I found out how beam splitters don't make 50-50 beams. So why don't you prove me wrong? Prove that the beam splitter creates two equal beams of light, identical beams of light. Go ahead, prove it. Show me wrong, liar.
Experiments. Hasn't gone out and looked at any data from the...
So more horseshit. I play the data. I've obviously played every one of Professor Lewin's videos. I videoed me critiquing Professor Lewin's videos, for fuck's sake. So another just overt lie. I mean, you can't, it's so provably inaccurate that I haven't. When it's fucking documented in my videos. I'm documenting me watching physics lectures at colleges. How the fuck? He never saw physics. Yeah, I did. Hundreds of them, asshole. And I videotaped me watching them, fuckhead. So, I mean, it's such a stupid lie.
Real world, but he just sat in his house and thought about it.
That didn't happen, obviously. Over the last 10 years, I've watched thousands and thousands of videos on the subject of physics. So it's just an overt lie that's demonstrated in almost every one of my videos because I'm playing the clips of the other people's videos. So it's just such an incredibly stupid lie.
And he, somehow came up with the correct theory of physics.
Yeah, I actually tried to draw a picture of their physics and said, oh shit, you can't draw a picture of this. This is so stupid. Doesn't make any fucking sense at all. The nothing tells the something what to do. Oh, I'm supposed to be living in a universe where everything's controlled by energy and thermodynamics and conservative forces, and yet they invent non-conservative ones and they're perfectly comfortable with it. And I said, no, I'm not too comfortable with that. Single photon goes in, it splits in two little radar-sensitive wave functiony thingies. Yeah, try to draw a picture of that. Yeah, it didn't work.
Just from doing that. So, real waves made with real water exhibit diffraction.
So, more nonsense, right? You want to call it diffraction. Diffraction is not interference. Diffraction means you have a consistent thing going all the way across. It's consistent. It's a wave front. Okay? It's consistent.
Okay, this might come as a surprise to you because, contrary to what you've been told by the physics guru Gary, you would think, based on what he told you, that...
Okay, I'll play Professor Lewin clip, right? I've played it in my videos before at least twice. I can play it again for you if you like me to, where Professor Lewin says diffraction is a bullshit word. He says that, okay? He says this isn't about diffraction, it's an interference pattern. It's not a diffraction pattern, it's an interference pattern. Diffraction doesn't create a pattern. Interference creates a pattern.
Water waves obviously don't exhibit diffraction, but they do, and we will demonstrate that with video evidence.
Okay, let me see them demonstrate interference. That's what I've said. So he's again lied. I never said water waves don't exhibit diffraction. I said water waves in a single slit do not create interference patterns. One wave cannot interfere with itself. Dumbass. If I throw a rock in a pond, it doesn't create an interference pattern on the surface of the on the perimeter of the pond. No interference created by a single rock. Idiot. Fucking idiot.
Real water waves made with real water exhibit diffraction and two-slit interference. So let's just go to the video.
Okay, go to it.
We have a video here.
You'll lose.
So let's see, is this the right one? So this is a video from 1964. It was recovered in mid 2016 from Missouri.
Recovered. Yeah, so it was buried underneath. It was buried under the Tesla vault.
S&T surplus warehouse and played on a Technicolor 810 instant movie projector. It's an 8mm film. So let's go ahead and watch this.
Exciting. So this is the best he could do. He has to go back to 1962 or something. I love old videos. But, I mean, he can't find something modern and new.
Okay, so single slit diffraction of waves in a ripple tank.
So again, it's diffraction. Diffraction isn't interference. Diffraction isn't interference.
The pattern depends on the ratio of slit width to wavelength. First, the slit width is held constant and the wavelength is varied by changing the frequency of the source. So, just to explain what they're doing here, this is a ripple tank and they have an impediment. Okay, so off camera they have a wave source, a wave generator.
Right, so what do you have? Perfectly spherical waves. Perfectly spherical waves. Perfectly spherical waves. Brighter in the center, obviously, for obvious reasons. Shorter distance, less fatigue, and that's it. There's no diffraction. There's pattern. There's no interference pattern. Retard.
Which is a long piece of material which is bobbed up and down in the water to create waves.
Let's understand, and they're doing it in a tank that's much larger than the slit. So when they're doing their bobbing, part of the problem is they're creating a whole bunch of harmonics against this surface. So it's bouncing back and forth against this surface. So they're ending up creating noise in the signal, quite obviously. Now light's not going to do that. So this, the comparison is like I said, I'm perfectly satisfied with this image. But just understand, there is some noise in the image because they're allowing a bunch of other frequencies to get through the slit. Quite obviously. Well, obvious to somebody who knows a little bit of physics, right? Yeah, obviously, it's not obvious to you idiots that when you bounce the water back and forth between these two surfaces, you end up creating a bunch of frequencies that are not consistent with the frequency, the original frequency, because this distance constantly changes, so the bounce rate will constantly change. So you're creating a ton of new frequencies, and those new frequencies will bounce right through that hole eventually and create noise in your signal. Are you smart enough to get that?
Which go towards the barrier, and they go through this single slit. And we'll notice here that the water waves diffract. Okay, meaning that they spread out.
Right, which doesn't have anything to do with creating on-off patterns. I mean, do I have to put the slit pattern below you to show you the on-off? The on-off, on-off, on-off. We're not talking about diffraction. We're not talking about a straight line. Straight line going on. Idiot.
Okay, and as the wavelength is increased, we'll see how the pattern actually changes as we vary.
Right, so look at the wave that's going in. So here's the line showing you the wave going in. Look at it. Is that one frequency? Oh, no, it isn't. Is that a consistent straight line? No, it isn't. Obviously, this isn't a very well-performed experiment, retard. Oh, how pathetic. So he thinks if I throw a single rock in a pond, this is what it does. It creates a crookedy wave. So anyway, so he said diffraction was when it was nice and consistent. And now he's increasing the frequency, created so much noise that now the line is completely broken and crooked. He's obviously sending more than one frequency through the hole. And, it's interfering. No, but there's more than one frequency going through the frickin' opening, retard.
The ratio of...
Look at it. Look at how uneven the lines are now. Look at how uneven those lines are.
Okay, so...
Clearly, you can see that there's noise going in, noise out. Duh.
Right here we notice that there's very clearly defined Fraunhofer diffraction lines here.
And again, I'll just point out again, it's because you're putting more than one frequency into the hole. Duh. I mean, duh.
So we have here and here, we have Fraunhofer.
So again, he's saying that this is interference. So obviously it won't create interference on the surface. It wouldn't create a dark spot or a light spot. It wouldn't create a place where there's no wave and wave. So there's clearly not nearly anything that's canceling these waves out. They're clearly easily seen. They'd be arcing all the way around. They're not canceled out in any way whatsoever.
For diffraction lines. Now, if you had listened to Gary...
Well, they're clearly not going to be on and off. We see what on and off looks like, right? We see what off looks like. Does this look like it's off? Oh, no, it doesn't look anything like off. Yeah, so bullshit.
He would have told you that water doesn't do that.
I'll tell you that if you do the experiment correctly, water doesn't do that. So at a low frequency, there's less noise, quite obviously. The higher the frequency, the more noise you're generating. So all you have to do is change the experiment by, instead of moving the whole pond, just move one little part in front of the slit so you create less noise, and then you won't get that pattern anymore. That's my prediction. Okay, it's my prediction if you do the experiment correctly without putting distortion into it, that you'll get the correct results. Nice spherical waves. No interference.
So why would he be lying to you?
Okay, let's just understand about who's lying, right? So he says this is a legitimate experiment, even though you can see the noise in the wave. You can see the wave has more than one frequency in it. No doubt about it. Quite obvious in the image. I mean, it's obvious in the image that there's now noise in the signal. Garbage in, garbage out. Is it any more complicated than that? No.
About the shape of water.
This is why I had to resort to a 1950 one. Now, Piro played one from MIT, that was like from the 70s, where they did the same thing. They create a bunch of noise. You can see the noise in, noise out. Quite obvious. And so this is what they call doing honest physics. Who do I appeal to here? I mean, how unreasonable are you critics? That none of you critics will admit that that's not a scientific, a well done scientific experiment. You won't admit it. Just like you won't admit Eddington wasn't a good experiment. He got 10% of what he was hoping to get in terms of the quality of his experimental results. And you think it's a great experiment that proves anything. Just like you think this proves something. And that's how you respect science. It's how you respect the scientific method. It's something so obviously shenanigans. Obviously not done under clean and pristine conditions. Obviously done with a flaw, a fundamental flaw in the performance of the experiment. I mean, that's how credible you people are.
Waves. That's amazing, isn't it?
Yep, so that's it. Is there anything else to say? I mean, obviously poorly done experiment, and he says, look, it's proof of my theory. Look, I've proven my theory with a 1954 poorly done experiment.
Okay, and as the frequency increases even more, we see even more lead clearly.
Yeah. Again, the fact that you're going to get more noise with a higher frequency is just such a duh moment. Oh, you don't even know that much about physics? That the more rapid you create these reflections, the more reflections there are, and the more noise you're creating? Oh, gee, I couldn't figure that out.
Defined Fraunhofer lines, which are lines where the crests and troughs are at a minimum. Okay, so there's almost no water waves in those areas.
Now, obviously, the faster, you see, when they go to a high frequency, it turns into one straight line, asshole, so all your lines are now gone. Light doesn't do that. So, then the reason is because once you get to a higher frequency, the velocity of the water is so fast that it's not sticking to the sides anymore. You're reducing the friction. Friction reduces with speed. The faster you can make something go, the less friction has an effect because there's less time in contact with the surface. So the faster the frequency, the less adhesion to the surface, and the less drag, that is the less rounding of the wave. So how does light do anything like that? If I put higher frequency light in, it doesn't create a straight line. So there's absolutely no parallel to light here, is there? No. So just more bullshit.
In those regions, or the water waves are very small in magnitude, whereas in the center, they're very large. The water waves are very large.
And for real physical reasons that you seem to be totally ignorant of. Yes, this is a physics experiment. There's physics happening here. We know why water creates rounded waves. It's because the water goes through the center, moves faster than the water that has to stick to the sides. Do you don't understand that theory? Shit, what a dumbass.
And have a great magnitude. And then we have smaller areas where the wavelengths are more well defined.
And if they slow it down slower and slower, the waves get rounder and rounder. So if they quit pumping noise into the experiment, it'll get more and more perfectly spherical. And that's the truth. And they don't want you to understand the truth.
You know, and then we have areas where there's no water waves at all.
So again, okay. I can just keep
all of that
freezing it and just
clearly
show clearly these uneven lines.
In contradiction with what you were told by the physics Jesus, Messiah.
So what kind of physics is this? If mine's Jesus physics, what kind of physics is this? Muslim physics? I mean, you're clearly, completely distorted the truth. You've ignored all of the flaws in this experiment, and you're pretending it's showing you something. When, it's showing you that noise makes a mess out of an experiment. That's what it's showing you.
In Bedlam, okay, so as the wavelength is held constant and the slit width is increased, we should see the same effect. We should start out with a lot of spread in the wave, and then as the slit width is increased, we'll see less and less radial pattern and more of a Fraunhofer diffraction pattern.
So he just keeps saying that this has something to do with Fraunhofer. It has nothing to do with that. That's just noise, period. There's nothing else happening.
Okay.
Throw a rock in a pond, you'll get one wave. You're not gonna get any pattern.
So again, we still see the clearly defined diffraction lines here, and then also here and here. They're less well defined, and then we have a very
they're incredibly less well defined. Yes, so it won't. The pattern it will create on the screen will not look like the double slit pattern, or the single slit pattern.
large central maxima right here. And if you,
I mean, you can go by the shape of the wave. Look at the way the wave is totally misshapen. I mean, this isn't that hard to figure out. They've made the slit so wide that water only adheres to these little surfaces, so it's only bending part of the wave. It's obviously not bending the whole middle of the wave because they have it really open. Again, we know what water does. Water is sticking to the sides. Are you saying light sticks to the sides of the slits? I mean, what's your theory? This is just such a stupid comparison. I mean, it's just showing, look, this is what it's come down to, right? These assholes have a little tiny bit of knowledge, and it's just showing how dangerous it is. This is a fucking Ken Wheeler distortion of reality. Look at the ferrocell. It proves light is bent by magnetism. This is the same kind of fraud.
listen to in Bedlam, in Dumb Jackass Ham, you would never would have known that.
And petty little dickless Farley, okay, who has to sit there and play with other people's personal information.
So this is when you have a very large slit width. The water waves continue.
Yes, for obvious reasons, because the only thing that was making the bent wave was the adhesion to the surfaces, and you make the surfaces so far away, the water isn't going to get bent by it because it's such a little tiny amount of friction for the mass of the wave. Yeah, duh, it's not going to stop it anymore.
And they progress in sort of a straight line. Okay, so that is the first. That's Exhibit A.
All right, complete fraud, as I pointed out. So none of you people who are the naysayers, right? Even though you hate me, but you're supposed to love physics, and you won't come to my defense and point out how, well, yeah, that's not a good experiment. That's just fundamentally flawed. It's not showing an interference pattern. It's just showing what noise can do to the pattern, and that's all. You put more than one frequency in the hole, you'll get many different kinds of waves out. Waves, multi-frequency in, multi-frequency out.
Okay, and just to make it clear, so let's see, let's source this. All right, so
again, this is his desperation. He's gone back to 1964 to find an experiment that wasn't done very precisely to defend wave theory, because he can't do it with any real experiment, any modern day experiment. Even Professor Lewin has done the wave tank experiments, and yes, he does speed it up way too fast, but he doesn't point out and say, look, that's just like light interference patterns. He doesn't make that correlation, I don't think.
This is a film titled Single Slit Diffraction, produced by Educational Services Incorporated, titled Water Waves. In the diffraction pattern as an interference.
Oh, so was it a published scientific experiment? Did they publish it somewhere? So he proves that experiment proves that water waves create interference patterns. Single slits create interference patterns. Oh, sure it does.
Interference phenomena. The positions of nodes and maxima depend on both the slit width and the wavelength.
And as I pointed out and demonstrated by just looking at the video, you can see that the wavelength is not consistent.
In the last sequence, one sees strong straight wave fronts beyond the slit, and the diffraction effects are relatively less significant. Even if the slit were very much wider than shown, there would still be diffraction effects at the edge of the slit.
So he just says at the edge of the slit. And what happens at the edge of the slit? That's right, the water is sticking and breaking and sticking and breaking, so it creates a little bit of noise just going across the surface. the wave going next to the cement. If I was to actually do this water wave experiment, you can understand as it goes across the cement, it sticks unevenly. And so there'll be a tiny bit of noise that comes out of the edges. But I have to make the waves go in really fast to create a lot of noise.
Okay, multiple slit diffraction is shown in film loop 8243. Okay. All right, so that's...
yeah, it's stunning. Piece of crap.
Is,
so again, anybody who gives a shit about science and done well, the scientific method, integrity, getting to the truth, you're going to defend that experiment. Because you hate me. You're going to defend a piece of shit like that.
Demonstrations from the film Interference and Diffraction by James Strickland, art director P. Larkin, edited by E. Carini and J. Strickland.
And published in what scientific journal? As the truth. Because obviously it wouldn't pass an editor, right? An editor would see the obvious flaw in the experiment. There's a bunch of noise. You have more than one frequency going in, idiot.
Strickland, from November 1964. Produced by 1964 by Educational Services Incorporated.
An icon, no doubt, in science education.
Okay, so it's not a... there's somebody in their basement.
How do you know? You know who Scientific Education Incorporated is?
Setting up experiments.
Oh, so now you concede that I did experiments. You said before I didn't do any. Gee, that makes you just a liar right in your own video. You're lying. Saying two separate different things. Two explicitly different statements made in the same video. Contradicting yourself in your own video.
In their basement with lasers or something. Okay, this is another video. This is Exhibit B. Apertures and Diffraction, produced by OpenLearn from the Open University.
Another probably well-established as brilliant scientific material. I heard about them. Yeah, great.
So let's go here. So here we have single slit diffraction, and we can clearly see Fraunhofer diffraction lines.
Lie. I can't clearly see any such thing. So, but whatever.
Just as before, if we
have a tiny bit of noise down here, and obviously the waves are going through here, so we don't see anything.
Increase the slit width, we see that the diffraction lines are even more.
Right, we see the fact that it doesn't, the lines stay straight, but look how unstraight the lines are. Look how uneven they are going in. Noise in, noise out. Duh.
Pronounced. See what else they do. Yeah, so that's another video. Here's a video produced by the MIT Department of Physics Technical Services Group.
Right, this is the famous Piro video. So, so this is good science. All these fucking critics. This is the way you think science should be done. Just this crappy propaganda where you shove obviously flawed experiments in front of people and tell them that this is the truth.
In this video, we will see both single slit and double slit diffraction in water waves.
And so again, he's saying diffraction means interference. Right? I mean, diffraction has a definition. It's just the spreading. An uneven spread isn't the word diffraction anymore.
Okay, so here we have the ripple generator, the light source, and the waves are being projected onto a screen, which is a reflected light reflected off of a mirror on the bottom of the ripple tank. So we have a plane wave generator and a single slit barrier.
The same flaw in the experiment, right? Why are you generating waves over here? You can see the obvious flaw in the experiment, right? That this flapper is way larger than the slit. Not a little bit larger, way larger. And there's no possibility of the wave from here getting through the slit or the wave from over here getting through the slit. So all it can do is generate noise. It can't help in any way other than just to make noise. It doesn't allow the recoil to go all the way back to the back. this thing will keep moving and adding more energy to all of the reflections. So all of the reflections off all these walls will end up being sent right back into the flapper again to create more noise. I mean, it's so obviously flawed.
So let's see what this is. What we see here. Okay, so the water waves are going through the slit.
So look at them again. It's more noise, noise, noise. Look at this hard line right through here. Hard line right through here. Obviously more than one frequency going through. Obviously.
And they are diffracting. Okay, so here we have a narrow slit diffraction.
And so again, this is what he's calling putting one frequency plane waves into it. And you can see the huge gaps in here, meaning these are separate frequencies. So it's obviously more than one frequency being shoved through the slit.
A narrow slit in the barrier wall, and then they will increase the frequency. Okay, so now
look at the noise. Look at all that noise. Look at all that noise. Look at this. Look at this noise, 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 noise. I mean, it's so amazingly dishonest to say this is the really good, this is the well done experiment. Pay attention to this one. This is the real truth.
See Fraunhofer diffraction lines. Okay, and they will become more and more pronounced as the oscillation frequency increases.
Yeah, more noise.
Let's wait for that.
So again, it's just more noise, more noise, more noise, more noise in, more noise out.
So again, we see a very strong central maxima where the crescent troughs are maximized.
Well, we see nothing consistent, really. I mean, this is so feeble over here, and this is so much more here, and you know, this isn't going to create the same pattern anyway. But the point is you can see the wave shape is obviously being distorted by the fact that there's more than one frequency being sent into the pattern.
And then we have Fraunhofer diffraction lines, and then we have another maxima. All
right, look at the noise in here. Look at the amount of fucking noise in these waves. You know, anyway, well, I've already made the point. It's just pitiful that this is what people will do. This is what they'll resort to. This is like the stupid idiots, you know, making arguments for Noah's Ark, or some asshole showing some fossil that has a human footprint on top of a dinosaur or something. This is just such chicanery.
Maxima here, and as the frequency increases, we see very clearly
you see very clearly the noise has gotten so bad that you can't even see the waves anymore. You can't see any straight lines here anymore. There's so much fucking noise. Shit.
Find diffraction lines. Which, if you listen to the physics guru in New Jersey, this cannot be explained by wave phenomena. Okay, so now we see a double slit.
Okay, so again, they're just going to keep arguing it that the water waves create interference patterns in the single slit. Okay, so that's a fact, I say.
Pattern. So this shows double slit interference of water waves.
Won't show the two patterns though, will it? No, it won't show the little light spots and dark spots.
And I want to make something very clear before we go on. Let me pause the video here. I want to make it very clear. The pattern that we're going to see in this double slit pattern is not two single slit diffraction patterns, you know, on top of each other. Okay, this is very clearly a different pattern.
Says you. It's clearly very different than the pattern you're supposed to be showing, asshole. So you're not getting the pattern you're supposed to. I'm not going to put it up again, but the pattern I've been showing for the last 5 videos, it's clearly not going to show that pattern. Nothing like it at all.
Okay, we're not seeing two of these on top of each other. What we're seeing is a distinct pattern that you only get when you have two open slits in the barrier.
Okay, well, show it. First off, let's just point out look how much noise is in the signal again. So show it. Show the pattern. Obviously, it won't look like the double slit pattern in light. I mean, understand the pattern he's got to make the water waves show. I mean, this is just, how can he be this pathetic after all these videos and he's still arguing that all I have to show is on off? No, for it to look like the light pattern, you have to show it do the spacing thing, the empty space. You have to show this. Water doesn't do that. That's what you have to show, asshole. God damn. And you can't, because water doesn't do it. Water doesn't create the same pattern, dumbass.
Okay, so just as before, we see diffraction lines, but they're more closely spaced together. Okay, and as we increase the frequency, these lines become more and more pronounced.
It's
Here
rubbish.
and here, also here, and here, here, and here.
And look at the water coming in. Look at how diffracted that is. Look how messy this one frequency is now. Yeah, obviously not one frequency anymore. But it doesn't matter, because obviously the thing that it's not going to do is it's not going to create the two patterns superimposed on each other. And anybody honest will admit that. Water doesn't create the same pattern that the light does in the two-slit experiment. Just a fact.
So we see very clearly defined interference patterns.
Yeah, but we don't find the double slit in light that has the two little empty spaces. Yeah, don't find that.
Okay, let me pause the video, stop, cancel. Okay. For exhibit, so that was exhibit C, let's watch exhibit D. Here we have single and double slit patterns compared, and we will see that the double slit pattern is not, contrary to what this guy here says.
All right, this will be a lie, obviously, right? So I'm just saying, that's all they can do is resort to lies. Everything I've said is perfectly consistent with all those laser experiments. So you have to lie about what I've said to make it inconsistent in any way whatsoever. I've played those videos.
This guy right there says it's just two single slit patterns superimposed on top of one.
Yeah, two very different single slit patterns. One, 2 points this far away, and then 2 points this far away. Yeah, they make two different patterns. This one makes the little tiny bars. This one makes the envelope pattern. Fact. And the other guy, the Skyrim guy, would probably concede that, because that's exactly what his mathematics does. It moves the point sources right to those positions. Idiot. So even these debunkers can't even make a consistent argument with each other. I wonder if the Skyrim guy has enough integrity to say, I don't agree with this video. I wonder if he has. Does he have any testicles? Is he any kind of man at all? Will he admit this isn't a good argument?
Another. Okay, contrary to that, they are two very different patterns.
You know, they're very similar patterns, actually. One of them is exactly the same as the single slit, and because it's the same size, the impediment's the same size as the slit openings, theoretically. Well, I've already been over this, so this is just too stupid an argument, right? I mean, too stupid.
Alright, so this is the single slit pattern right here. So we see the central maxima here, and then we see Fraunhofer diffraction lines.
Well, whatever you want to call them, it doesn't matter. Okay, what you see is the fact that if I made the slit a little bit wider and a little wider and a little wider, I'd end up making this narrower and narrower and narrower, and I'd end up with more and more bars. That's what you'd see. Fact. We're falling
I don't know,
asleep
I don't think
here.
you can hear him speaking, so.
There we go. See, he's got a variable one, so he's making the slit wider. And wider. And wider. And wider. And the bars get smaller and smaller and smaller. So the outside slits are this wide, the surfaces. The interior surfaces are this wide. This ones are making the wide pattern. This one's making the little bar pattern. Two patterns superimposed on each other.
And by the way, this is produced by MIT. Every single physics student.
Right, so I've played these videos. There's nothing I'm saying that's not at all in conflict with this at all. So this is just total straw man bullshit. You can't even call it straw man. It's exactly my argument. So he has no evidence that I've said anything contrary to that demonstration. I've showed Professor Lewin making a variable slit and opening it wider and wider, and the bars get smaller and smaller.
Student that goes to MIT, it could watch this video and note the measurements of the experiment, and they could do the math.
And they do the wrong math according to Skyrim. So again, you just keep country. Look, they like I said, the critics can't even make a consistent argument.
And if the math didn't work out, okay, and let's see how many students per year are admitted to MIT per year. How many? Oh wait, that's the video. That's the picture for next.
Yeah, the fake lensing crap, the stuff that Einstein said was impossible.
Yeah, we don't need
that idiot
that.
Einstein said was impossible.
So, MIT physics program. Admissions per year.
Okay, so the most famous MIT physics lecturer is Professor Lewin. I just played his video with an overt inaccuracy in it. It's just overt. Undeniable by anybody who's honest. Undeniable by an honest human being. And he's going to tell me what the admissions are to MIT. So what? They still weren't told the truth. Okay.
See how many.
Can I speed this up? How long is this premiere?
Rate per year.
Yeah, right. You're just too interesting.
Well, let's. What about the just? Is this it?
The argument from admission.
21,000 applications for first-year admission, 1,400 offers of admission, 1,107 first-year students enrolled, many of which will probably...
So if he was teaching multiverses and they teach all kinds of stuff at MIT. You think all that stuff is true? Is that your theory? That everything the MIT professor says has to be the truth because they charge big money to go there. So none of it will ever be demonstrated to be flawed or inaccurate science. Physics will never decide wave-particle duality. They'll never resolve it. They'll never figure out that bent space is a bad idea. They'll never figure out any of this stuff.
Take physics classes, intro to physics classes, and all of them have access to these videos. And all of them could do the calculations themselves.
Right. I've played the videos, so again, this is just a canard, a big fat lie. I've played their radar videos, and I've pointed out how they could change the experiment and prove that this has nothing to do with waves interfering.
And check out that the math works out or whether it doesn't work out.
Yeah, that's what I'm pointing out. It doesn't work out for waves. The point sources are the surfaces.
So imagine the statistical improbability that for all the many years that this video has been up and that they've taught, not only that this video has been up.
So again, this video says absolutely nothing. It makes no assertions. Okay, so that's just bullshit. It's a demonstration video. It's not an assertion video.
But they've taught Fraunhofer and to double slit interfering.
Yeah, I'm not saying there aren't diffraction patterns in the sense that I'm arguing, okay, what's causing the pattern. It's not waves interfering. No photon interferes with no photon. There's no wave functions interfering. There's just the fact is the light that's next to the surface hits electrons, and hitting electrons deflects the motion, as Feynman would say. As Feynman diagrams would illustrate.
Patterns and done demonstrations of such with lasers. What is the probability that no single student has ever tried working the math out on pen and paper and seeing that it doesn't work out?
So again, it's already argued by your own Skyrim guy. He's already conceding that two-wave math doesn't work. It doesn't account for this. I showed Professor Lewin doing the math. It didn't make this empty spot, idiot. It didn't make those two. The math didn't work. It didn't predict the pattern accurately. That's a fact, an undeniable fact. And the math that did work moved the point sources to the surfaces, just as I'm asserting. So the math that does work is my math. The math that doesn't work is your math.
But it's all a big lie and a hoax. I would say the chances of that are about 0.
Okay, but you didn't do any of it, right? Their math does not predict this dead spot right there and right there. So you can keep lying, but it doesn't.
Okay, so here's the double. This is the double slit pattern. Now notice that we have dark bands where there weren't any before. Okay, so it's very clearly not just 2 single slit diffraction patterns.
Lie again, right? Of course they're not where they were before because you've changed the slits. So of course you're changing where the lines are, idiot.
Patterns on top of one another. Okay, it's very clearly a different pattern.
Yeah, and I would argue it's going to be a different pattern when you change the thickness of the slits or the width of the slits or the thickness of the impediment. You'll change the pattern, yes.
And this is for a small spacing. If we fast forward, this is what we get when we have a larger space in between the slits. We have more dark bands in the...
We've already been over this so many times. Yes, we know exactly what's changing. Okay, you change the width of the outside surfaces, make them further apart, and you'll create more little thingies. And if you make the center impediment thicker, okay, then you'll widen and narrow the this where the dark is. You'll move it further out or further in.
The central lobe. Why would we have more dark bands? And then we have so that's the question. What accounts for this? Now, again, as I pointed out, wave mechanics explains this pattern perfectly.
Okay, so he just said it. It explains it perfectly. You know, there's no arguing, right? I mean, there's no point. The Skyrim guy points out how it doesn't do it perfectly. You need a whole different kind of mathematics where you change the point sources. And if you don't do that, you won't get these dead spots in your mathematics. So again, he says it's perfect. It's not perfect. The 2-wave diagram will not be the symmetrical 2 waves will not create the asymmetrical pattern, asshole. And that's an undeniable fact. And you're forcing me to argue it? I mean, you're worse than flat earthers.
Okay. But if we go to DraftScience, Daft Physics, we have a completely different explanation. So let's watch this very different, completely different explanation straight from the horse's ass himself.
Okay, so who knows when this video's from, where it's from, you know, how many years ago? Nothing.
Oh, I forgot you can't watch. There's no audio.
Yeah, there's no audio. Yeah.
Well, we can read the transcript. So you're not gonna be able to watch video, but we can read the transcript here. It would have to hit the barrier between the slits. It cannot possibly, a straight photon cannot hit it. So what's happening, quite obviously, I think, is so here's the hole, and here's the gun. The photons, the only photons that are getting that RL ever going to go through one of these slits are photons that have to be bent by the edge of the...
I was showing the way they traditionally did the experiment, which is they put a small aperture in front of. So, you know, the Young experiment is actually done with more than one aperture. The first aperture cones the light, and then it sends it into the 2 slits. I think that's what this is. Again, this is from years ago. I mean, obviously I'm drawing on paper and all that kind of stuff. I haven't been doing that for a while.
I mean, you see, some people just aren't very adept at public speaking. I mean, this is a transcript.
Oh, this is the guy telling other people how adept they are at public speaking. You know, another guy who obviously snorts stuff.
Straight off of YouTube from this fucking video, and it's just goddamn... it just shows absolutely no command of the English language whatsoever, as if it was a non-native speaker, which is just pathetic.
All right, I'll read the transcript of your pathetic video, this pathetic piece of shit, and we'll just point out how you obviously can't make an argument worth shit.
But anyway, he goes on to say that the cause of this pattern here, we'll get to this video in a minute.
Yeah. See, those little breaks are going to sound so incoherent when I read them. Yeah, you're going to sound like such a fucking idiot.
But the cause of the pattern... Let's go to the next page. Let me just make a new page here. So let's say we have a double slit pattern here. So the cause of the pattern, according to him, is that
I just made like 4 hours of videos, right, explaining all this stuff, and yet he can't just find in those 4 hours of videos that I've just made the inaccurate parts and just demonstrate where I'm wrong.
when you shine a red laser through here, if the photon is going, through the middle, pretty much in between, or equally. Let me actually erase this and make it bigger. So if the photon is traveling through the hole, through the center of the hole, it's not going to diffract much. Okay, it's just going to continue, and it's going to hit the wall over here, and that's where you get that big central maxima. Okay, if on the other hand,
says you, why would it make a big thing? It would have to diffract pretty good to make a big thing. So it's got to be doing some diffracting, and the laser beam itself is spreading. So let's concede that point.
The photon is traveling close to the wall, to the edge of the barrier. The edge of the barrier is going to bend it. Okay. Now notice he never explained.
Now, I never said the edge of the barrier is going to bend it. I've made it explicitly clear over and over again for at least 7 years. It's hitting electrons. That's what's on the surface of things. Things are made of nuclear bits. Okay, nuclear bits are the only universe. The atom is mostly empty space. What do you think a surface is, retard? Well, a surface is covered with electrons, jackass. And I've said clearly the photons are hitting electrons, and the electrons are changing the direction of the energy.
Means the cause of this bend. Okay, so we are free to surmise.
So again, that's a lie, right? I mean, it's just so overt. I've said it over. I've said it at least 400 times. At least 400 times in live videos, in real videos on YouTube. You can hear me saying photons hit electrons at least 400 times. And you just said I never explain it. What a fucking liar.
That the cause of this bend are little leprechauns here. So let me just draw a little leprechaun here.
All right, so I mean, this is just so pathetically bad, right? I mean, anybody who's viewed any of my videos knows I've said it so many times they're probably sick of hearing it. That photons hit electrons. That photons hit electrons. Photons hit electrons. I've said it so many fucking times. And now he's pretending I'm saying it's leprechauns. No, I'm giving you a real physical mechanism that's causing the effect. One perfectly consistent with Feynman. Feynman understood that photons interact with electrons. Richard Feynman, have you heard of him?
We have a little leprechaun, and he has a little leprechaun hat and a big dumb leprechaun face. Okay, there's a leprechaun. And the leprechaun is, he has a fishing pole. Okay, and the fishing pole has a little hook on it. And
so you can't even call this a straw man. It's so bad, right? I mean, this is just, it's not even the shape of a man. It's not even made out of straw. It's just a shit blob. He's just dumping shit on the board and saying, somehow that's what I did. I made that shit. No, I didn't make anything like what you're describing here. I didn't say it that way. I didn't say anything like that. I didn't imply it. You're just such a pathetic liar.
The fish, the photon fish, as they fly by, the red and blue fish, hook onto the line, and the line swings, and it bends their path, and then they continue like this. Okay, and somehow it only bends.
So let's understand. I've done this part at least 75 times. Okay, in videos where I've gone to the trouble to exactly explain that electrons are always in pressure with each other. They're attracted to protons, electrons, right? And so there are free electrons. They're never really free. They're semi-attracted because they're distant from the proton, but they're also repelled by the other electrons. So we'll do repulsion in straight lines and dotted lines for the attraction. So this is attraction, and this is attraction. And I've pointed out that when a photon, the energy hits an electron, what the electron is going to do is it can't really move closer to this electron. If it moves straight line, it means it gets closer to this electron. So there's pressure pushing it away. So the electron absorbs the momentum by moving not straight. And then it moves back, of course. And it's really the process of jiggling an electron, moving it from one position to another, that actually creates photons. Okay, that's what they're actually created by. It's just energy of moving a surface. When there's force coming at a surface and I move the surface, I'll either move it away from the force or into the force. And that's what's creating the condensation, the collection of the energy in a density. That's what's creating the increase in the density of the momentum. So anyway, but that's the reason why it goes in a direction, because the electrons are always in tension. And depending on how you hit them, what angle you hit them at, what angle the atom is at, it changes the angle you're hitting it. So you hit it more towards the electron, it bounces away even more, and that's what changes all these angles. So each little quanta of energy from the photon that hits an electron, that electron will be moving in one of these directions, and that is semi-randomized, which means that's your diffraction. They're just deflections.
It, some multiple of 3 degrees. So it could bend at 3 degrees, 6 degrees, 9 degrees, 12 degrees, some multiple of 3. So then what happens?
So in the new videos, I've pointed out how that's completely unnecessary. It can bend it in any one of those. So that's overtly been said 3-4 videos ago. It was said 2 weeks ago, but it doesn't really matter. He's not going to argue what's being argued. He's going to argue this fallacious crap.
Is you end up getting these bands of light out here that are smaller than the central maxima. Okay, now that's all fine and good, but let's use some logic and make a prediction, which is what the scientific method is all about, making predictions. Okay, so you set up your theory and then you make a prediction and predict what your theory, what's going to happen if your theory were true.
I predict that a single slit won't create 2 waves. That's what I predict.
Okay, so that's what we're going to do. Okay, so if this theory were true, we have our wall here, and then we have one photon, and it goes through, let's label these. This is the right-hand slit, and this is the left-hand slit. So left hand. Now, every time a photon is fired from the laser, it has a choice. It can go either through the right...
So let's just understand, I've called them surfaces for more than 7 years. There's 4 surfaces here. That's the important part. 4 surfaces.
Hand or the left hand slit. Okay, so in case 1, let's suppose it goes through the right hand. Then it's going to end up in one of these bands with a probability. Okay, so I'll draw 3 bands for the probabilities. So it's going to land in here with 80% probability. It's going to land here. This is 10%, so maybe 7%, 2%, and then the rest of them are well, actually, let's just make everything simple. Just make everything really simple.
So again, this hasn't taken any of the new theory into account. The whole idea, like I came up with a year ago, that the photons, the polarization, the fact that the bits are sent in different locations, so the photon never survives going through the slit. It's broken. The quanta are sent to different locations, and you have to add up the quanta. So again, it has nothing to do with what I'm currently arguing.
Keep it simple, stupid. It lands in one of these 2 with 10%, and it lands in the other 2 with 10% probability. Okay, and the total probability is 100%. Okay, with 100% probability, it will land in one of these bands.
So he's wasting our time because he's not pointing out the pattern we're really after is the gaps. Okay, the 2-slit experiment in light, creating the 2 gap spots. There's 4 or 8 or however you want to count. But the fact is that there's the asymmetry in the pattern. That's the thing we're trying to explain here. I mean, that's the current subject. So he's not even on the current subject.
Bands of light. Okay, so in case 1, it will land in exactly one of the bands. Okay, now in case 2, okay, it will go through the left-hand slot here. And it will, land in one of these bands. It will land in this band, in this band.
No, the current argument would say to you that there's no such thing as a single photon. The photon's polarization is almost as wide as the slit. The photon does not survive going through the slit. They're broken into pieces. The pieces are reconstructed on the surface. So we can just zoom through this because it's a waste of time. As far as I'm concerned, it's a waste of time.
Land in exactly one of the 5 blue bands. Okay, so this is in one of the 5 red, and so this is in one of the 5 red bands. If it travels through the right hand slit, and if it travels through the left hand slit, it will land in one of the blue bands. Okay, so what happens if we cover one of the slits up? Okay, and we impede it. Well, now we have to disregard case 2. So now this is disregarded. And so the photon, will either not go through either slit, or it will not reach the wall at all. Okay, well, it will either not land on the wall at all because it will be blocked, or or it will hit the wall, the blue wall here, or it will go through the right-hand slit and it will land in one of these bands with, 100% probability, 80% probability that it will land in this band, and then 10% in one of these two, and 10.
So again, this is never anything I argued, but I always argued you had to reconstruct the phase. So, this really isn't the argument. It's not consistent with anything I've been saying in the last 4 videos. So, this is just a waste of time.
Where no photons land. So this is, in reality, what we get are areas in this central maxima of the single slit pattern where there's actually no photons at all, or very few photons.
All right, well, the single slit doesn't create 2 patterns, so this is just absolute nonsense. So, waste of time. The 2 single slits will create exactly the same pattern on top of each other, yes. I mean, if they were single slits. But obviously, we're reconstructing phases. And so, like I said, the idea of single photons traveling through can't make any sense.
Okay, well, that's logically impossible because every photon, either went through the right-hand slit or the left-hand slit, and in either case, it would land in this region with non-zero probability. But then when you open both of them, that probability goes to 0 for these bands here.
So he drew big bands, and now he's drawing small bands. Now we know that's not the factor. The factor is these 2 outside locations. It's all about the vectors, the lines you can draw, and the lines being the proper phase. So we know that the photon can only exist where the phase is correct.
Okay.
So let's understand, they've never done this block one of the slit things and I have light where the dark was. That doesn't happen. You can only diminish how much light is getting to the surface, frankly.
So, and to put it another way, just to make it really, really clear, because you have to do that, because that's the level of ineptitude with which we're dealing. Okay, you can't just explain something to these people one time and they understand. You have to explain it in many, many different ways.
No, you don't. All you have to do is draw me a picture of 2 symmetrical waves making an asymmetrical pattern. That's all. Just draw me a picture of that.
Okay, suppose that we block one slit. Okay, and then we look at a position right here. Okay, we set up a photon detector right here, and with one slit open and the other one covered, we get this many photons that landed in that particular small region.
If you do this experiment, because the slits are only 1 millimeter apart, you'll get the same exact pattern. You block one slit, you'll get a pattern. You block the other slit, you get the same fucking pattern. It's only going to be a millimeter difference. You won't be able to see it on the wall. The difference will be 0, essentially.
Okay, and logically they had to go through the right-hand slit. Okay, if on the other hand we closed the right-hand slit and we opened the left-hand slit, then we have this many photons. Let's say maybe there's one more that goes through this time. Okay, and logically all of those ones had to go through this slit. And then the red ones that would have landed at the same location were blocked because this slit was closed. Okay, but had it been open, of course you would have had not only these blue photons, but the red ones that would have landed there anyway, in addition. Okay, so but the effect, according to this classical explanation with classical particles, would be that.
No, well, the effect is where you're measuring from, and that's all that's ever going to matter is the point sources. So again, the photons are going everywhere in pieces, and all it is about where you can reconstruct a photon. And obviously, if you only have one slit open, okay, we know it doesn't pile up like this, so that's not even a rational argument. We know it's creating pattern. So I don't even know why you're drawing it like this, because it's stupid.
These 2 single slit interference patterns are cumulative. The effect of opening a second slit has an effect of adding the 2 patterns on top of each other. So if you have this pattern on top of this pattern, the resulting pattern, according to a classical model.
So that's how he drew it again. So he drew the 2 being separated by a distance that wouldn't exist, because it's 1 millimeter difference here. These 2 lines should only be 1 millimeter apart from each other. And like I said, this surface is meters away. This pattern is a foot across. And so 1 meter in 1 foot would not be noticeable. 1 millimeter.
Would be to add these heights. So you add this height plus this height is equal to this point here. This height plus this height is equal to this point. This height plus this height is equal to here. And so what you would get is a central maxima in which there are no dark bands. Okay, so under a classical...
No, so that's not classical. It's stupid. Obviously, the two aren't separate. They'd be right on top of each other, so the whole thing is stupid. He's making such an obvious mistake. Newton wouldn't make that mistake. Let's understand, Newton had already done all these experiments. Inside surface, outside surfaces. He had already teased out most of this information. Young didn't add anything to it. And, this isn't really about fucking slits. It's about surfaces. And Newton knew that much. And you don't. He lived 300 years ago, idiot.
Model, and under Gary's model, we would see no dark bands. Okay, because remember, all the photons that land in these central maxima are the ones that were not bent to the right or the left. Now, if you look at the ones that were bent to the right or the left, we would see the same thing. We would see smaller bands that have maxima here and here. Okay, but
like I said, so again, the argument is we already know this is all about phase, and it's all about restoring the phase. The photons are landing on all these locations, and the problem is they're landing out of phase, the pieces. And it's just about where you can draw where you have the distances a full wavelength, and that's what the math indicates, and that's what precision indicates, that this is just about algebra and geometry, and doesn't have anything to do with fucking waves.
We would not expect to see multiple lobes within each band. Okay, but of course we just saw from the video evidence, from real video.
You would if you understood that these would be the point sources, and these point sources are now further apart from each other than these internal ones, and therefore they have longer lines, and longer lines have more wavelength difference. Therefore they make smaller blocks. So it's quite easy to understand.
Made with real lasers and from real water waves. That this is not in fact what we see. Now what we in fact see is a double slit pattern with dark bands in the central lobe. Okay, so how do you explain that?
How do you explain the dark lobes, the lobes that are all existing with two slits? Two symmetrical waves go out. How do they create those asymmetrical patterns? So I can say it over and over again, but he won't show us how that can happen, because it can't happen, frankly. That's the truth.
Of course, the answer is you can't. This is an impasse. This is a logical contradiction. Okay, so Gary says that you have to draw a picture or it's not true. Well, of course, anyone with half a brain knows that just drawing a picture doesn't prove anything.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, making a model does prove. Yeah, it does work. You can show something center of gravity. I can make a little clay model of a person. I can make them fall over because I move their center of gravity. Models work really great. They're excellent proof.
And he claims that the pattern is caused by random noise. Okay, so when he watches this video, he will tell you that the single and double slit diffraction patterns in water waves are caused by random noise.
Not random at all. I explained exactly where you're generating it. So it's not random noise. It is noise, though. Clearly.
Okay, so I have a question. Why would random noise just happen to create this pattern that looks exactly like the single slit diffraction pattern?
Because it's two frequencies, right? They're going to be harmonic frequencies, generally speaking. So you're creating the half harmonic and then the quarter harmonics. Okay, and so the harmonics are basically what you're indicating. Those are creating the shift in the multiples of the wavelength.
Of a laser.
I didn't say.
Of course, the answer is it couldn't.
I didn't say the laser was creating noise. There's no interference pattern with a single laser going through. I mean, a diffraction pattern. Okay, it's an interference pattern. So you're just going to play a game that's a diffraction pattern. It's not a diffraction pattern. I can play Professor Lewin telling you it's not a diffraction pattern. It's an interference pattern. I mean, I've played it 3 times. Want to play it again?
Is that these physicists are lying, and they're faking these experiments, and they're creating conditions under which the water waves behave exactly like light. But then if you believe
it doesn't behave exactly like, and like I said, is you can tell quite obviously, you've all can do it, you've seen it, the single opening with a nice calm wave going in, okay, no noise, makes a nice round wave coming out. So again, it's just horseshit. It's nothing like.
that, it's a massive conspiracy.
It's just no. It's just you quote mining. You're just quote mining bad fucking experiments and saying this is the real evidence. This is the real truth. It's just like you're a UFO person or something. You're trying to prove some wacky, stupid theory by quote mining the reservoir of evidence, and the reservoir of evidence has in it the fact that if they make these waves nice and straight, you'll see a nice round pattern, and you know it. You can see it in the real world. You know, they have video of ocean waves, creates a nice round pattern. There's no doubt about that. And you're just quote mining the evidence.
It's tinfoil hat. It's so ludicrous. You'd have to have a brain smaller than the head of the smallest pin in the world to believe it. But even if you accepted that and granted it, then you would have to also accept that physicists have some kind of formula that predicts water waves. Okay, which is another thing that he said couldn't be true. He said that physicists do not have equations that predict water waves.
It's a lie. I never said any such thing. I'm saying it doesn't apply to light. Light is not bending the same way water bends. They're very different things, light and water.
Okay, so in summary, this is all a bunch of nonsense. Anybody who believes this has the IQ of a termite. It's bull fucking shit. And just to make one last exhibit, this shows double slit diffraction, or I'm sorry, double slit interference of electrons that are shot one at a time. So this is an actual video produced by Hitachi in
Right. So why? So again, another thing, another video not produced recently. But how come there's no blank spots? How come electrons aren't doing the same thing light does?
1989. Okay, we can see here's the credit right here. And what they did was they created a double slit apparatus, and they shot electrons through the double slit.
Right. Well, we don't know what the apparatus looked like, right? So we have no idea how this experiment was done, actually, right? But it doesn't matter. I mean, again, I'm not arguing that electrons don't bend electrons. Of course they do. Electrons hit electrons. They move in a funny direction after the event.
Apparatus one at a time, which means that the electrons would not have time to interfere with each other if they were classical particles.
And the argument isn't that they have a phase or that they are interfering or that you're breaking the electrons and remaking them. The argument is you're scattering them.
Okay, so let's see what happens. Okay, and again, these electrons are shooting through one at a time. There's no possible way that they could communicate with each other if they were classical particles. So there's no possible way that the photons could know which slit the previous ones went through ahead of time. You know.
Again, no one's arguing that they do. You are. You know, you're the ones that believe that photons are entangled. That's your silly nonsense, not mine.
Unless, of course, they're exhibiting wave-like behavior.
Wave-like behavior.
Okay, so as we see, as we increase the number of electrons, they exhibit a very clear diffraction or interference pattern.
So again, it's an on-off pattern. Okay, so that's all it is. It's diffracted a certain amount, diffracted a certain amount, diffracted a certain amount. And they're electrons. They're not photons. Electrons are like 1,000,000 times bigger than a photon, retard.
So this is a very clear interference pattern. We see interference lines.
And we don't see this typical two-slit pattern, though, in light. We don't see where it gets completely black and then starts up again. So why doesn't it have the same pattern if it's an interference pattern? If it's a consistent theory, why don't you have a consistent pattern?
And this is completely not what you would expect with classical particles. Okay.
So again, you would expect it if you understood the particles are very small and the surfaces are very big, in terms of the surfaces are made out of atoms and the particles are made out of force. Gigantic difference.
Okay. And you cannot explain them with classical particles.
Yes, you can if you understand what an electron is. If you understand what electrons are and that electrons are on surfaces, you can perfectly understand.
Oh yeah, okay.
Nice ending. Brilliant. All right, anyway. So, all right, so he's had his 2 shots. So far, he hasn't come close to the subject. Okay, the subject is the missing bits in the 2-slit experiment. And what do they prove or indicate? And they indicate that your wave theory doesn't work. That's what they indicate. And that my theory does. So, blah, 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 blah. So that's enough. Till the next time, till the next version of bullshit. And that's all it's been so far, is absolute bullshit.